Hi there, Eimear Burke here. Welcome to another Fireside Chat brought to you by the Order of Bards, OBODs and Druids. And this is where I'm in conversation with what I used to say an ordinary member of the Order, but in fact my guests are never ordinary, they're quite extraordinary. But those who are not well known. So just type in your name and let me know where you're from. Hi Stefan, hi Ellie, lovely to see you. Hi Red, lovely to see you too. So just type in a few, let's see, there are more people. Hi, Pat from Ulster, keeping the side going. That's wonderful. Hi, Jan from Buckinghamshire. Wonderful. Linda from Maryland. Welcome back. Lisa from Washington. Hi, Poppy. And Stephanie from Utah. Wonderful. So, great. Hi, Ava from Belgium. It's nice to see familiar names. I don't know you, but yeah, I know you by your names now. And Sarah from Belgium. And is it Chelin or Selin? I've asked you before. From Wales, forgive me. Claudia from Portugal, welcome. And Diane from Durham. Hi, Penny. And Scott. And wonderful. So my guest to this evening is, we're going to Northern Ireland, and my guest is OBOD member Vincent Creelan. Vincent, you are so welcome.
Eimear, how are you? Thank you.
So just tell us where you are and just a little bit about your landscape.
Sure. Well, as you know, I'm in Northern Ireland, so I live in a town called, it's spelt Newtown Ard, as we would say. The original town was Ardes, but 400 years ago, it got its kind of royal kind of proclamation, so it became the new town of Ards. So that's at the top of Strangford Lough. It's about 10 miles, I guess, southeast of Belfast. It's a small original market town, I guess. Largely a Protestant loyalist town in Northern Ireland terms, but one in an area with great cultural heritage and historic significance. I mean, Ards itself above the town is Scrabba Hill, where there was one of the old Stone Age forts, and that's where I would go up on the hill above the town and light my fire at Samhain and Beltane. We have an old priory in the town, and as you go on down the peninsula, that will go around the loch before you go out to sea. You have Grey Abbey, you have Nendrum. Over in Bangor, you have one of the great ecclesiastical sites, and of course these were all pillaged by the Vikings. In fact, I discovered very recently, I'm kind of an amateur archaeologist, so I follow up that stuff, that there was a sea battle in Strangford Lough in, I think it was 876, between the dark heathen Vikings and the light heathen Vikings, and one of them was killed. One of the kings was killed. There were the Vikings from Dublin and the Vikings really from Denmark and Norway. So the dark ones from Norway, he was killed and was buried. Now, interestingly enough, there was no cairn up in the hill above the town in Newton Ards. Before there's now a tower there, a folly. So when that was built, the Victorians completely grubbed out the old.
You have frozen on me, Vincent, and I don't know. Okay, I'm going to wait until Vincent comes back. I see Aaron living in Thailand, or Lewis, Tina. He's gone again. Let's hope he comes back.
I'm back. We're both back. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. I don't know where you went to. So you were talking about the Victorians getting rid of...
Yeah, so this king was killed and was buried somewhere locally. Now, it turns out the old cairn up in Scrabba Hill, when they were grubbing out the whole thing to build this folly, they used black powder to explode the capstone on the burial grave. And inside, they found the bones, which they described as of a very large man. In fact, even though the hill it was called the grave of the King of the Fairies, as one of the legends, but I suspect a Viking king from Norway was buried there after that battle. So, yeah, there's a lot of history here, and so for me, it's a very comfortable place to be. I got to Scrabba Hill. It overlooks the town, and from there, I can see across to Scotland. I can see the Strangford Mountains. I can see right back to Belfast, and there's another couple of old hill forts in Belfast which would have been connected to mine, in that the families are from their Neils up in Ballymena and stuff right down before the English kind of routed them. So they have these hill forts where they could keep an eye on their land and stuff. So there's a lot of, right from the prehistoric times. I collect lots of Mesolithic flints and artifacts from these different places. So it's been occupied for 6,000 BC at least. So and when I look down at the loch, there's an island there where I would all go and find oyster middens, which shows that our ancestors 6,000 years ago went down to this island, had their summer there, and all they ate were oysters and mussels and small stuff. And so it's very easy to be connected with. When I go up there at dawn, because I always hold both my rituals at dawn. So as the sun rises and comes apart in the eye, everything, it's not hard to connect with the ancestors and connect with everything that's gone before.
And it's interesting because when you talk about connecting with ancestors, do you have a sense these are ancestors of place, or do you have a sense that these are your ancestors, or does that matter to you?
It doesn't altogether matter, because the place we live in was a very different place, 6,000-7,000 years ago. I mean, Newton Ards was largely a marshy area with inland lakes. So these were our people. These were the people that had travelled from parts of Europe, had hit Rathlin, where their burials had been found. We've analysed, DNA's been analysed. Then they come down through. So I just see them as my ancestors, just as equally as I would think of maybe my grandmother up in yard in Brashame. That the line that we, as we go back in time, our connections get narrower and more connected. So, and also I think because of myself, the connections I feel to the land, that I feel for our heritage. If we believe in an other world, and we believe in the sacredness, maybe the power of ancestors, that there be as welcoming of me, someone who recognizes them, who takes time to be still with them and emanate from that place peace and love and something of what was before. So I think if they can accept me up there, and I've always felt very welcome, I can definitely feel part of that family. And that's the same with so go ahead.
No, you go on.
I was going to say it's the same when I come down to Kilkenny. My journey as a trading OBOD started very much with Commonwealth down there. It's easy, if you're open to that, to connect with the spirit of the land and of the people and of nature. Whether you're down in Kilkenny, where you maybe have never lived before, or whether you're living in a house where your grandparents and your great grandparents maybe lived.
Yeah, I think it's the importance of acknowledging ancestors. It's a bit like when you come to a new place, you acknowledge the people there. You're a visitor, you acknowledge the living in somebody's house, for example. And I think being able to acknowledge the ancestors as well. And I think when ancestors are acknowledged, then you're welcome, regardless of your lineage. So I think that's lovely. Go on. Yeah.
I live in an old house here, and I know the man that built this house was a Grand Master in the Orange Order, and was a mayor of the town here. But sometimes I'm digging the garden when I find marbles and things, and I found little things, and it just makes you connect to the humanity of the place. That all right, there was a man who maybe I mightn't have agreed with, or some people might agree with today, of his politics, but you know what, I do know, and I've researched him, that he was a philanthropist. He was a believer. He was a spiritual man. So I just accept that there's every space has presence and has a spirit, and you work with it. And I assume that I don't assume there's any malevolence in any of these places. I just look for the goodness. If it's there residing and the place feels good, then I'm going to accept it. Just as when we're in ritual, when we've got, I guess, Christian OBOD members, and we've got Baha'is, and we've got a whole range of it's that coming together of a whole range of people who have a spirituality, who see care for each other and love and preserving the land and looking after the earth has been important, then you can connect with that.
It's interesting. Pat has made a comment here, and I think it's related to ancestors. She says the bodies found at Rathlin and Ballinahatti carry the same disorder that's hemochromatosis, too much iron in the blood, that is still widespread in, she says, our population today. Does she mean the Northern Irish population?
Well, I think what those examples, the three lads, I've actually written a poem about this, it's called The Three Rathlin Lads and Maria. So Maria is the one found, the bones found in the circle at the Giant's Ring, and the three Rathlin lads are the ones. And they are separated in time, but what it shows is that just like our old legends and myths, of the Tuatha and the Malaysians, modern early or Celtic romanticism has these people coming in, and we all loved each other, and but they didn't. What the DNA shows is these people arrived, they conquered, they took over, and then after a few generations, their DNA was the DNA of the island. So yes, those people came. Maria came probably from the southern Mediterranean. The lads, the Rathlin lads, as I call them, came from the more northern region. But yes, they were more like blue eyes and stuff. That's now the DNA, the predominant DNA markers. So those are our ancestors. They travel great distances. The last of them arrived here, maybe 3,000 years ago or so. So it's that's why I love science as well, because science is informing us, but also the racial memories we have and the mythologies we have, they're actually being shown to be largely quite significant and actual memories of and stories of, with an element of truth to them, of what was happening during those times. The fact that science is doing that now for us, I think, is fantastic.
Wonderful. And of course, well, there's always this thing: is are we Celtic or are we Neolithic? So, I mean, I'm not even going to go into a conversation about that, but perhaps not Celtic. But that we trace our ancestry back even further, that the Celts didn't come and colonize Ireland, but they brought their language, their culture, their art, and how we came to adopt all of that as one of these mysteries as well.
Every time science looks at some new discovery or science is applied in a different way to bones or to caves or to burnt fabrics under a menu or something. Our ancestors were more akin to us than ever. They loved art, they loved family, they cared for each other, they were artistic, they were intelligent. I mean, I know we hear Cro-Magnon, we think, oh, that's terrible, but just because it was there in France where it was, but Cro-Magnon, man and woman, were probably stronger, smarter, sharper, more adaptable to life than ever we were. But they're our ancestors. That's where we came from, and they traveled right across and have been thinking intellectually in a way that's not that different from us, from what we think so. How is your internet connection? You keep cutting. Oh, from this point of view, it looks good. I'm not getting any of that, so.
Oh, okay. And how is it for other people? Just to let us know, how's our sound doing? And because you keep breaking a little bit. So anyway, nobody's complained yet, because usually people give some feedback if it's. I know, and I welcome it so that I know rather than I'm talking to avoid. Anyway, so laggy but okay. Thank you, Stephanie. That's all right. So as long as people can manage it, and it's interesting because Pat, my very first guest here is from Newtownards as well, and she's always described Newtownards as the armpit, and for us down south it's the teddy bear's ear, because we see Ireland as looking like a teddy bear, and then it's ear on the left because it's facing to the west, and it's left. It's the teddy bear's left ear, and you're just there. But and it's an absolutely beautiful landscape. County Down is just an incredible place. So it's been lovely to be able to visit that place, and I look forward to going there again someday. So what? So anyway, I'm fine, but you're not, you keep cutting. So I think we're just going to have to, hopefully, it'll be okay.
Okay.
What brought you to Druidry, Vincent? I mean, I don't know what kind of background you come from, or just share a little bit about that and what brought you to.
My grandparents are all Catholics and pretty devout, but my parents moved to England for a few years and nominally Catholic. But the weird thing was, throughout my life, I always felt myself different to my family. Now, I never got on well with my father, and that was just the thing of it. But I remember reading early books about Irish mythology and also Norse mythology as well. And I came across one about the Selkie story. And I'd never heard of this before. And I suppose I read it when I was about 12 or something. And I had this like epiphany. It was like, oh my God, I understand now. This is why I feel so great for my family. That my father, my grandparents on both my sides, the men were eel fishermen. I thought, I am a Selkie child. They have kidnapped me and taken my pelt and my shimmering pelt's hidden somewhere. And that's why I have no connection. That's why I feel so separate from this family. And I always remember going to Rathlin Island and seals would always bob up beside you. And I just loved looking into those big puppy eyes. We think of dogs now, but these beautiful big eyes, and they really see you. They look at you. They I've kayaked and stuff, and they swim beside you. And sometimes they go over the power of your kayak. There's a playfulness, but there's a connection there. So I think that's when I first started thinking of myself as being really different. But it's just like I'm a gay man. I didn't know when I first started that what that really meant when I was young. But as I read more, I connected with nature. I found my family would have been hunters. They were shooting birds and foxes and sorts. I was the one who was out doing bird surveys with the ornithology group. I was going to Copeland Island and ringing birds so we could trace where I went. And I just had a different and for me, a much deeper connection. I could go out and sit in my granny's farm away at the back and sit out at night and watch the stars or listen to the birds or watch the fox going across the field. So that was, and I suppose as I got older, I then ended up going to do a degree in environmental science because I wanted to become more literate in the subject, which was close to my heart. And I think if I'd stayed with that, if I got married at university, if I hadn't, I think I probably would have been on one of the Greenpeace boats out stopping the whaling and stuff, because I was very active in politics at university, and we had this big painted across the ceiling, save the chicken and save the whale and all this kind of thing. And that's what I wanted to do. But I got married and I had responsibilities and there were no jobs in environmentalism, and I ended up being a scientist and administrator, and I got in police. And to be honest, the police knocked out of me for a long time any real spiritual connection. I didn't have time for it in a way. The nature of the work I was doing and the things you saw, just like anybody, I think was quite challenging at times.
Sorry, you were a scientist in the police force?
No, I was a scientist before I joined the police force.
Oh, okay. So you left science and then joined the police force. I left
university. I was an administrator for a while and then science for 3 years. It was horrible. I ended up in veterinary science, and that just wasn't my thing at all. It was disgusting. And I left that because in a very small scientific community, working in the same place as my wife, as it turned out then, and it was just killing me. And the only other career, and I might have done it when I was in, but my father was so opposed to it, I might have joined the police when I was 18, just because I thought police were heroes. I thought they were amazing people. They secured us, they looked after us, they held the law, they protected us. And then I joined and found out that it's full of a bunch of hellions and difficult circumstances, and I got promoted right through, and I had as many arguments and debates and trying to pull the line with my authorities as opposed to the community members. But so when I retired, I retired.
You said you're describing them as hellions. Now I hear that word. I've been described as a hellion myself. So, and then you said there are Shara hellions, and then I rose quickly up. So you, the chief hellion, and explain what a hellion is.
Well, it depends who he's saying it, but the hellions were kind of at times ignorant, stupid people, or they could be reckless, or they could be fickle. It really depended on the circumstances. But a hellion is someone who just does their own thing, their own crazy thing, and everybody just looks at them as a bit of a fool or as an idiot or maybe even a certain amount of badness in them, depending on what they're doing. So yes, sorry, Hellions is I guess it's an Ulster Scots type of phrase, Ulster Scots language, which I'm not a big fan of, but I just think we have a dialect. But yes, so I was watching a film last night, and this guy talked about, oh God, I can't remember what it was now. He was using words, and there was another Polish person in the film, and they kept going, "What?" It was English. I had no idea. So yes, Hellions is a phrase I would use sometimes. Yeah, there were individuals who shouldn't have been in the police, and just like there are many controversies at the minute with the PSNI here in Northern Ireland and with the Melbourne Police, I just think, as a vocation, the police maybe isn't as much a vocation as it should be, or maybe used to be, but certainly should be. And having retired from the police 15 years ago, I am very proud of my own service. I'm not as proud of the service as I might have been, because there were dark days and there were dark stuff going on, and there's a lot to be concerned about. But I think that's the same with a lot of very big organisations now, whether it's the Catholic Church or stuff that's going on in the health services. We go from one scandal to another, and you know what? It's ordinary people that pay the price, and that's the shocking indictment of it all. And there's really very little accountability, which I feel. That's again one of the things that attracts me to Druidry. There is a respect for the law. There is a love of justice. There is a love of doing the right thing. And as a child, I never got from my father. My father was a very hardworking man, and he was a bit of a hellion. Yes, definitely. I remember reading Philip's book. I bought about 10 copies of this to give to different people. When they always ask me about Druid, I said, there's a great wee book if you just want to get some sense of where we're coming from and what it's about. And I remember reading, particularly for me, I read the Code of Ethics and that kind of stuff that came out of old writings, and it just really connected with me. And I wish I'd read that book. Well, maybe it wasn't available 30 years ago, but if I'd had something like that, I could have explained better to other people and to myself why I thought and felt the way I did and about my actions, because I always seemed to be atypical when it came to my community and places that I worked in and even with my times,
So, because just in case, because you put the book up too quickly. Oh, now there's an echo. I wonder why that is.
I'm not hearing anything different, so
I don't know what's. Anyway, just Philip's book. So Philip Cargom's book, What Do Druids Believe? And yes. I agree, it's an amazing book because he's managed to distill, what do Druids believe, Sean? We can put it in the, or maybe I can type it now. How do I do that? Okay, I'm going to do it now. What do Druids believe? And it's by Philip.
It's not one of those books, a dummy's guide to type thing. It's just like you said, Eimear, it's a beautiful distillation of what Druidry might be for everybody, because Druidry and paganism is different for different people, but it sets it out so clearly, so subtly, so distinctly, and relatable. It's like I said, I think I bought about 10 copies and sent them off to different people, and I said, look, if you really want to, you can research and you can buy, but this book is a starting place for you just to get some sense of, if you want to think what are, because I'm a firm believer we're 21st century Druids. I'm not a Druid from 2,000, 3,000 years ago. I might relate to them, but we have to be a Druid in the life we lead today. And if we can't do that, I'm not sure there's a lot of point. Well, for me anyway, that's a bit of a wide sweeping generalization there.
Yes, I just want to get you back to your Selkie story. Somebody mentioned the film The Song of the Sea, made by Cartoon Saloon. And that was made in Kilkenny because Cartoon Saloon live in Kilkenny. And a number of the artists who work in that company come to ceremonies here. And I highly recommend it. And they made The Breadwinner. And they also made Woodwalker, which was released in November. And I got to see it. And it's kind of based on the wolves, the werewolves of Ossory. Ossory is the area here. The tribes in Kilkenny going back hundreds of years were the Ossory. So the English form would be Ossory. So look up Cartoon Saloon, anyone who wants to see it. And Song of the Sea is an absolutely beautiful film. Have you seen it?
I have, but the whole story of the Selk is fascinating. When I looked into it a bit, there's this thing about how it originally, a lot of the stories about beautiful men coming ashore, and then I think it changed in Victoria times. We can't have that. So it was beautiful women drawing the men away and stuff. But the very fact that the Sami people came, these stories are from the Faroe Islands right down through Scotland, Ireland. I think Cornwall and Brittany as well have the same stories. But then the fact that those people who dressed largely in seal skins and had seal boats did travel down and fished and traded, and probably sometimes, I don't know, kidnapped slaves to take them back, or not slaves, but people anyway to work for them or to mate with them or whatever. This combination of a real truth of culture over the thousands of years, and then also these stories about it, and the mysticism and the beauty, and actually the real love stories that are often told in when it comes to the Selk is beautiful. But that drew me in, and I still, I've been with my partner 20 years, and I forgot that when we first met 20 years ago, I told him that I thought I was a Selkie and stuff. And then when I was writing my first collection of poetry as a bard, as you know, I published 3 or 4 years ago, one of my poems was about the Selkie, and I remember turning to him and talking about it. He said, "You told me about this. You told me 20 years ago you thought you were a seal child. I'd known all about this. Did you forget that?" So, it's been there in my life.
Do you have your book there? Do you have your poetry book to hand?
I don't actually know. It's up in the office. So
I wasn't quick enough to say.
It's available.
No, I wanted to read it.
Pardon?
I was going to ask you if you would read one of your poems, but if you haven't got your book close to hand.
No, well, it'll take me 2 ticks to get it if you want me to, but no, it's upstairs. I'm actually just pulling together my second collection. I'm 3/4 way through. I've got all the poems. I've whittled it down from like 150 to 53 poems. So I'm just putting them in the manuscript now to send to 2-3 friends. Do that first. Would you read this? Tell me, am I hitting the mark here? Is this worth it? Or are the poems that clearly should be out? Or yes, I'm still going to publish my second collection at the end of the summer. So,
okay. Well, I look forward to seeing it. So this is from Ellie. It's a lovely thought, the Selkies guiding us through the waves to close the metaphorical gulf filled with water between them and us, there and here, past and present. I think that's beautiful, Ellie. Thank you.
Okay.
There's another question from Sean Hinchliffe, and I don't know if you can answer this question. And I suppose the answer is probably yes, but not, or I imagine there are. Are there Druid links? Wait a second, he says, this is from Sean. I think Sean lives in the UK. Are there any Druid links to my birthplace, Omagh?
Oh.
Do you know of any? Because, I mean, we have sacred sites that are not necessarily Druid.
I worked this past year, I haven't been able to volunteer because of COVID, but the place I do volunteer with is to do with refugees and asylum seekers. And there's a guy, Sean. Now, he would talk, he's a farmer from down that part of the country. And he told me one day, we were just chatting and stuff, and he said, "Oh, well, sure, my uncle is the family Druid." I was like, "What?" And it turned out a lot of the name, I suppose, are still related to the old clans. There's still a tradition going through those families where one of the older generation takes on the mantle, whether it means anything or of the family Druid. So clearly there is down in Tyrone and Fermanagh, absolutely a tradition is maintained there of because of Armagh and the seats. There's a number of places around there which were seats of the High Kings and many of the tribal kings. They all had their bards and they had their druids to advise them and to guide them and to help them with the health of the crops and the land and the people. But there is still, I was really surprised by it. I never heard of it before. And he just said it so nonchalantly. He said, "Oh yeah, sure, my uncle is the druid of the," I can't remember his surname now. I always just knew him as Sean. So yes, the answer must be yes to that, and yes, that there's still some tradition what depth there is to it, I don't know. What significance it has, but it's still, that's been going on, I guess, hundreds of years,
Okay, and Pat Booker has said the Druids' altar in Tyrone, and then the Druids' chair in Well. I've been there, and loads of history around Aucherclocher and 5 Mile Town.
Yeah.
So I think there's a wealth and a richness. And you know what's really interesting, and I don't know which county it is the Florence Court yew tree. That is the original tree for what we call the Irish yew. So the English yew is the one that is very, very bushy. And then the Irish yew is that tall columnar aspect to the yew trees, and you'll see those in graveyards around Ireland. But the first one came from Florence Court. Actually, I was there last summer, and I don't know. Do you know this? So there was I can't remember. I think it might have been the Earl of Enniskillen. It's in his house. His gardener had found 2 unusual yew saplings up in the mountains. And he gave one to, I don't know if that's his title, the Earl of Enniskillen, who planted it in Florence Court. And that has been, and you cannot grow it from seed. It grows from clippings, from cuttings. So when you look at it now, you'll see it's actually gone bushy because of all the cuttings. But nearby is one that has the columnar aspect. But that's nice, and that's Northern Ireland. So I think that's lovely. So
it's interesting that, even I'm just thinking there's a church up near Ballintoy, and the first minister of it is buried in the Ballintoy church down near the harbour. But the manse where he would have been is called the Druids' Manse, and there was a burial with a capstone up above it a few fields back, and it's called the Druids' Altar. And apparently back then, when I think the minister dates from like 1830s or something. But even as Christians, they called it the Druids' Altar and the Druids' Manse. So there's something that's been there a lot longer, which, as we know, Christianity kind of subsumed or embraced a lot of traditions. But there's one where they actually kept the name of it, and that's the way in the North Coast up near Ballintoy.
That's wonderful. And Leslie Harvey says, one of my ancestors discovered the Irish yew in Fermanagh. Lovely. Thank you, Leslie. That's nice. So I don't know whether your ancestor was that tenant farmer who found the sapling on and I can't remember the name of the hill or not. Wonderful. Lovely, these lovely connections. So anyway, how did you find OBOD?
I phoned OBOD through a mutual connection that we have, a friend, Paul.
Who's been a guest here. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. I hadn't heard of OBOD. I mean, I guess I knew there were different Druid orders, but I've been in my path, in my mind, in my heart, my soul, it was very much an individual thing, and I didn't know anybody else who, I like anybody else you hear about, which is covens and different things, but I had no connection with those. And it was through meeting Paul, and we talked about it at great length over a few months, and then we came down to yours, Eimear, for Samhain, which was my first significant group ritual. I had done smaller personal rituals with Paul, and I remember sitting at the next morning. Your husband was cooking his sausages and eggs and tomatoes for breakfast, and you kind of just asked me, so, well, what do you think of this? And we were talking, and I remember joking. You were talking about your kids and how they used to, joke about your Druid and say, oh, what's happening next in this house? What spiritual things are you going to be doing? And I like that. There was a lightness to it. And I remember asking you 2-3 questions, and you a couple of them, you really just threw them back at me, like, think for yourself here. You're asking stuff about what happened 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. What do you think, and how do you relate that to what's going on in the world today and stuff? And that taught me that Druidry was there's an ability to find out, but it is something. It's a personal journey, and it's not the same for everybody. And I remember leaving that morning. I think I said to you I was really interested. I remember going away thinking, okay, I'm surprised about this. There's no indoctrination here. There's no, this is the law. This is the message. I am a senior Druid. and other roles besides. And I know way better than you. It's still find out for yourself. Read, take time, do what you do already when you're out in nature. But maybe now think of it that it's more than just a feeling, that there's maybe something to this. You could find something in this. And of course, I had a lot more chats with Paul. And it was only then that's kind of how it got started. And I looked a bit online at druidry.org, the website, and saw the range of resources there are there. In time, I met, you're talking about Pat there, who lives in the same town as me, or she lives up the mountain road. Yeah. Looks over the town, a very beautiful place, fantastic views. And I think also that first ritual, I remember that night, there was... I heard people calling out in the name of Christ. I heard people calling out in the name of different traditions. And I also remember, okay, this is a space where, and I think in Northern Ireland, we're that used to tribes and tradition and there are lines which can't be crossed. And yet I found myself in this space where individuals were coming from a whole range of backgrounds, a range of cultures, and a range of ethnicities and stuff. And there was no, you have to conform. Of course, OBOD gives a grounding for the ritual. It gives you a framework within which to work. It really enables you to think about what you're doing and how to respect the ancestors, how to respect the place you're in, and to think about what you want to do, to think about the energy, and to think about emanating peace and gaining wisdom and calling out to ancestors and being able to connect. And I think that's what it did for me. So I wouldn't say it has changed me in that I'm connected to OBOD. I've been a member of OBOD for several years now. I'm not sure I can ever see myself leaving the Bardic grade. I don't know that I need to. It's a very comfortable place to me. I know people have said, "Oh, I've got to be a druid. I've got to be an Ovic druid." We're druids. You have your spiritual path. There's nothing. I know we have certain, when it comes to seed groups and when it comes to groves, about roles and responsibilities. But for an individual and an individual who goes along to whether you're a Bardic grade who's been in it for 15 years or whether you've been a Druid grade and you've done it in 3 years or whatever, it depends on you, the individual, and how you connect with the people. And it's very much an individual journey. But OBOD gives you this family and this community and this connection, which if you want to, you can involve yourself as much or as little. But there's people there to reach out to when you do have needs, or like Pat has said over this time of COVID, set up our chaplaincy group as such, where people know if you need to talk about someone, but you need it to be someone who is on the same path and journey, that has the same connection spiritually, then you've people there you can talk to. And Pat's doing a wonderful job. She's a fantastic kind of host for that and held together. And some of the stuff is very witty and funny, and some of it is much deeper and more intellectual and academic. And that's OBOD. I mean, when I've listened to Philip in the past, 1 minute it's joking about something, and the next minute it's deeply about meditation, and other times it's there's deep questions about are we appropriating traditions from other. Everything is open to be discussed. Everything is open to be examined. But at the heart of it, we have our oaths. We have those things that are dear to us. And for me as an individual, those are core things that just bring richness and health and well-being to my life and to my mental well-being as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know why there's this echo. It seems strange. It comes and it goes.
I'm not hearing it, but you must be. I'm not.
It's really, really strange. Somebody has a question. I don't know if you're going to answer this. This is from Dawn Hilton. I've wondered if the druids can hear the sacred stones speak to them. I have found the stones direct me to more sacred stones nearby. I don't confess to be a druid. I've always allowed the stones to lead me spiritually from the age of 4 years old. I can recall my first connection.
I personally am a very firm. I have this thing about stone ringing. When I look at Stonehenge and these places, I think there's more to this. These are great monuments. I think our ancestors had some way to make those stones sing to us in a way, whether it was out loud or whether it was resonating with us. But I know, and I have seen people doing lithic music as such.
Yeah.
I just think that, I mean, I've never seen a ghost in my life, but I think natural elements, if the circumstances are right and the materials are there, just the way we can record something on tape I don't see there's any reason in certain circumstances why something can't be recorded and retained in stone. And if the circumstances are right, and maybe it's just like when we talk to trees, maybe it's not, but it's about the language used or the connection. If we had it, if we got there, then you can hear something. I think it's the same with stones. I absolutely believe they can record sound and images and potentially memories. I mean, if water can, I think science is pretty clear about that. Stones can as well. Now, whether you have a connection, I think a lot of it is in trust. So when we connect with these monuments, when we go to Ballyknoe or we go to Stonehenge, I've never been myself, but you just know that before us, over thousands of years, hundreds, thousands of people have done the exact same thing as we've done at that very moment. They've laid that hand on. And I do feel if that's your path, I think there's a resonance in the right person, absolutely can come through to them. And I have not experienced that myself. I keep thinking about stone ringing, and I keep thinking it'll come, but I think it's wonderful if somebody does have that connection. I think it's a fantastic potential.
Well, I remember we had a ceremony. It was a moon ceremony. Must have been a dark moon ceremony. And where the Danu and Lou chapel off the tower. Sorry, I have I don't know if people realize I'm a priestess in the Fellowship of Isis, so I have a number of temples in my garden. And one is a ruined chapel attached to a Norman tower. And we were going around and we were chanting Awen. And I could hear the stones coming back. And that was the only time. So it's not, simply it was just an echo. But it was that particular, I've never heard it since. And it was almost like I could feel the ancestors singing through the walls. And I was just, I had goosebumps. It was tingly. And I haven't heard it since. So it was just a really, really magical moment. And it's wonderful with practicing ritual. I don't get magic every ritual. It's not the same. Each one is different, even if it was the same rite. But depending on who's there, how the weather is, all of that, every ritual is different. And that one time was that a particularly poignant time for the stones.
I think that's a good thing to recognize that in rituals, maybe we expect every time there'll be something hugely, deeply, psychologically magical. I mean, I think in the 6 or 7 years now I've been up to Scrabble Hill and gone up at dawn, and I always have a lovely experience. I think about 2 times, and it's been nature things, where nature, a bird like a raven has presented itself in a way which I've then gone to research and said, I can only find a couple of references to this bird ever having done this in time. And I'm deeply grateful for that, because at that moment, that time, nature had something to offer me. But there always, when it comes to the meditative side of it, the time you spend just allowing yourself to feel, there's always something new and good and strong and powerful. But yeah, you're right. A couple of times I've absolutely had entirely, utterly magical moments, which is hard to explain. And I don't need to explain it. But so the stone thing, I believe that if it's there and it's right at the time, and there's a series of things need to be in place. I mean, your experience must have been utterly amazing. I mean, that's just incredible to think, to imagine to get that feeling that they're on the other side. And your place is so old and ancient and such a history of song as well, I guess. Can you imagine? Amazing.
But it's and Chris, you see, if you have these experiences every day, then familiarity, that notion. My mother used to always say, familiarity breeds contempt. That's why you can't play with your friends every day. But that was her excuse. But it becomes, that's just another one. So magical experiences, I suppose, in and of themselves, magic is extraordinary. But you can have something extraordinary in the ordinary. But to be really, really, for it to stand out, I suppose, have to be special. Ellie has said, so many ancient etchings and paintings have been drawn on and carved in stone. There is a magical connection to the ancestors through stones as keepers of stories. Absolutely. Do you want to comment on that, Vincent?
I just, like I said earlier on, science repeatedly extends back the time when men and women and children crawled into the darkest recesses of the earth and left handprints and hand shadows and drawings of animals and mythical beings and experiences. Now, they were doing this 20, 30, now they're saying, like, I think the oldest one's, 43,000 years ago or something. And it's happened all over the place. It's happened in Australia, in North America, in France, in just South America, and Easter Island, where I went to. Even there was a people who got isolated for several hundred years on their own, and they went to stone. They went to carving in stone and of stone, and they wanted to leave. And the whole resonance of how it can, in that carving in, and the intention and the ritual that there must have been around that. We just didn't go in to start carving. There must have been. They believed they were doing such a sacred, amazing, in the belly of the earth, or maybe I know they talk about they were in the womb and those kind of things. So it just wasn't art. They were going deep into a dangerous place, an entirely dark place, to create and to leave something. I don't know whether they ever thought anybody else would ever find it, or whether it was to be given. It was for the other world. But yeah, absolutely. And that has to have captured something of those people and of their spirit and of their essence in doing that.
Absolutely. Just from a number of the comments, Dean White, Gabriella, others, around their connection with stones, just like they have connections with trees. So I mostly have it with trees. I my place to go to place is to a forest or woods, rather than. Not that I don't go to sacred sites, and I suppose I live in one, but I love the trees. I'm drawn there. But it's really interesting because different places have different kinds of resonances. So I really appreciate my experience of the chanting and hearing monks chant going around. It was just magical. So somebody says, Eimear, my grandmother grew up half a mile from Bryn Kelly. Oh, I'm not going to pronounce that. In Islam. Okay. When I first visited it, age 7, I had an incredibly strong feeling of people being present, like ancestors from long ago. It was as if they were talking to me. Never forgotten that. Yeah, it's those magical experiences. And Gabriella says they didn't have paper to write on. That's true. And also, when you think of certainly Druids, but then of course these are older than Druids. Imagine, our ancient sites that. Things weren't written down. They were kept inside. That it was an oral tradition. Just lovely, just absolutely wonderful. This is a question I ask: is Druidry something you are or something you do?
I suppose a little of both, but I think it has to be who you are. I think there's a core, there's an element. There's an attraction which you can't really understand. You find yourself attracted to nature and having a real appreciation for wildlife. And even if you're a scientist, you can't. But the connection between a microbe and a plant and an insect and a tree and it's phenomenal. And I think for me it's weird because I suppose a core. I did environmental science and I studied sciences. For me, I just love it that science reinforces the interconnectedness of nature, and I don't separate myself from that. And so I think there is an element of doing. I mean, the rituals. I don't have to do rituals, or I don't have to do a lot of stuff to be a druid, but they are a vehicle which encourages me to go places and to take time and to think about others. When the couple of poems I've written about, seeing it as a sacred place, and it's like dropping a pebble into the middle of a pond and it rippling out, and hoping that some of the goodness and the energy and the beauty emanates out around my town of Ards or in the greater space. And that's what that's part of our rituals and the OBOD poems. So there's the doing of it. There's no doubt about it. My service as a druid was as a police officer, but now in the past 15 years I've been retired, it was to the LGBT community as a volunteer, and now as the past 5 years I see the need in the asylum and refugee. And if somebody asks me why I do it, I do it because I'm empathetic and I'm compassionate, and there's a great injustice there. But it's a service. I joined the police as a vocation because I thought that was something to contribute to society. And I know policing was and will always be a controversial path in life, I guess. But no, so my service as a Druid, the doing of it, is in my volunteering to use whatever skills I have and whatever time I can devote it to enable people. And inside that, there's also there is the justice side of it as well, because when I work with asylum seekers, and I know Eimear, you have experience of this as well, of course. Mm-hmm. It's more than just putting food in someone's mouth or a bit of advocacy. It's way deeper and much more intrinsic and inherent. And it's like a lot of those vocations, you either do it because it's the right thing to do, or that it's or you don't do it at all. It's not virtue signaling, as I think is one of the common terms, or something. It's absolutely something that you have to commit yourself to and be heartfelt about in that regard. So I think it's both. Primarily, it's a deep-seated. You are the person you are, and for me, it took a while to recognize and to name it as such as a Druid. And now I'm very happy. I mean, as I said, I was married at university very young and a divorce. I do have a son. My grandson knows I'm a Druid. Sometimes they joke about it, but they have done some very beautiful things, which mean they recognize that it's a path that's important in my life. They don't see me as some crazy guy running naked up Scarborough Hill and screaming at the stars. I have chanted at the stars, of course I have, and at the moon. But so it's a path which even just like the same with yourself, I remember having these conversations. Your kids see that it's maybe not for them, but they see the value in it. They see it's the life that you lead, and the way I love I'm really close to my son and my grandson. That love comes from a place of, and I always say, I'm a good person, I'm an empathetic person, but it's more than that. It's a much more deep-seated, ingrained, intrinsic kind of individual, and like I say, now I name it. It's because I'm Druid, and I think Druidry connects all those disparate parts of it. So that's what it's about. That's why you do this, and that's why you continue to do it.
It's interesting because here's the echo again. Anyway, I don't know why it comes and it goes. It's gone, and I haven't done anything. So I don't know what the spirit of place here, what you're doing. But anyway, my own children are far more comfortable with what I am now because they're older, and my son will tell his friends about what I do, where there was a time it was like, you're ruining my street cred. But it's interesting, in Irish, the Irish language, this is the thing about, are you a Druid, or is it something you are, something you do? I never see it as a label, that this is something I call myself because I like the title of Druid or Drí. It's not that. In Irish, we have Drí atá anam is one way of saying, or you can say Ismisha Drí. But Drí atá anam means the Druid is in me. And I think that's what you're talking about, that it's something deep within. It's not a facade. It's something within. And I think Philip and I were talking with David Bramwell on the Catalyst Club last night, and somebody asked, how you call to Druidry, is it something you are you born with, or do you need it in your ancestry? And there's something that resonates for people, that they're called to it. And it's not an external thing, it's very much a very, very deep internal thing.
I'm not trying to sell Philip's book, but I think he, in this book, I'm pretty sure there's one part where he talks about people having a feeling about themselves, knowing that they have a connection and they have a resonance with different, and not quite knowing what it is. And it's only maybe when they finally connect the dots, and that might be through a people or through an organization or through the research or just through the person, they realize, makes sense now. Now I know. Now I get it. Okay. And you don't need, like you say, you don't need to name it necessarily, but it allows them to say, I know why I am the person that respects nature, or has a connection with the ancient places, or respects ancestors, or wants to fight for nature and look after people and that kind of thing. And there are many people like us who aren't druids and have those similar kind of attributes. But when you bring the nature thing to it, you bring the otherworldliness to it, and so much else. Yeah, it's you finally realize, you think, okay, I it's nice to be able to. We live in a time of labels. Labels is, but sometimes a label's not a bad thing to be able to do. To say, yeah, that's what it is. That's where I'm coming from.
It can be like what do you call it? A short form, a kind of
Yes.
an easy bridge. Now, just this has been up on the screen. This is from Pat. Vincent should write a book on science lessons for druids. He is the best way of weaving science and poetry. So that's something that you were talking about, Philip's book. So there's something on after the second volume of poetry. Another time.
I tried to write prose for 2 years before, and I realized after 2 years I'd wasted 2 years. I like my poetry. I'm not saying I'm a great poet, but I love my poetry. And this next collection does have some archaeological pieces. I have a piece about the goddess. I have a piece about my inner grove. There's one about. There's a different Selkie story where it's a love story, but I just can't write prose to save my life. So sorry, Pat, but that's not going to happen.
Well, Ellie Talbot, do you recognize these words? The earth becomes sacredly marked with venerated megaliths, rock shadows of the sun, gathering places for renewal, for sacrifice, for love, power, worship.
Yeah, that's part of one of my poems.
So Ellie Talbot has just put that up.
Thank you for that. But that wasn't in my first collection. How have you got that?
The goddess travels west.
Yeah, because been working on. That's one that's going into my second collection. Maybe that's up online somewhere. Ellie, if you can say where you got that or how I'd be really interested. Just because maybe I need to check my first collection. Am I duplicating a poem? But yes, I do write one, and that's the Maria and the Rathlin lads. It's about following, watching the sun setting, and where does the goddess go to? And they follow, and they come out to the far, out to the west, and that's Ireland's the last place, the last sward, and beyond that there's just endless sea. And it's how these different migrations came, and then their genetic marker became I don't say that in the poem. I talk about their burnished metal because they brought bronze, or they brought the wheel, or they brought the blue eyes and stuff, and how it becomes the dominant. So it's science in a way, but it's not actually saying it's science as such. But thank you, Ellie. Thank you for doing that. It's very beautiful.
Lovely. I'm glad you recognised it.
Oh yeah.
Okay, somebody makes a comment. There's. I told them I value the echo from the stones. So maybe this is an explanation as to why I get this intermittent echo. Anyway, okay. Now this is. Is there a connection historically between Druidry and witchcraft, in your opinion?
I'm probably not a person to answer that. For me, I just think there've been a number of paths. And I suppose we generally call them pagan, and I think Druidry maybe was perceived, and maybe in fact it was in its original times, maybe more male dominated. I don't know that for sure, because there are stories of some very powerful female historical or prehistoric figures who were druids and prophetesses and stuff. I think, Eimear, you're definitely more in a better position to answer that one.
Well, it's interesting because Philip was talking about this last night. If you want to know, he's written a book, Summer, called Druidcraft, where he looks where Druidry and Wicca meet. And the founder of OBOD was Ross Nichols, and he was friendly with Gerald Gardner, who's the founder of modern Wicca. And they were friends in the 1940s, and they would meet regularly. And they just went. So there's a lot of overlap. Both we both follow the Wheel of the Year, the Eightfold Festivals. nature-based. Maybe I don't know enough about Wicca to describe it, but often there's the goddess, the god. Maybe Druidry is broader, as in there's a range of polytheism, duotheism, monotheism, Christianity, Buddhism, whatever it is, that there's a broader sweep. But if you want to know, read Philip's book called Druidcraft. It's a really, really good book. It describes the two. And then pagan is a very broad brush. I see not all Druids are pagan. Not all members of the order would regard themselves as pagan. So again, that's a very, very broad brush to describe Druids, paganism, etc. So what would you say has been your greatest achievement
in
life, anywhere?
Oh, well, in life, I'm a parent and a grandparent, and I have to say, I knew I was different from very young, and when I say different, I realized that I was attracted to men. So to find myself, I'm 60 now, just turned 60 a couple of weeks ago, to find myself as a gay man who's been in a partnership with my partner David for 20 years this year, and I'm a polyamorous man. When we have a polyamorous relationship, but also to find myself having a son with whom I could not be closer, who knows everything about my life. There are no secrets. There's nothing hidden or whatever. And also to have my grandson. And it's funny, I look at them, there's pictures of my son and my grandson at the same age, and even they can barely tell each other apart. And I guess maybe I was similar, although I was ginger. They're not, they're brown haired. That's, for me, that's a great privilege and a challenge as a person to be a good parent, a good father. And I think one of my earlier poems, I think I've already said I had a very difficult relationship with my father. He was a very rough man, and I promised that if I've had children, I bring them up different. And I made that promise to my son when he was born. He was born by cesarean section, so I had him for a few minutes before his mom did. And I remember promising him that I would rear him differently. He would know love, and he would know that he was loved and cared for and cherished, and within boundaries and stuff. And the rows he and I have had, you could count them in less than one hand. And my father was a very heavy-handed man. I've never physically chastised my son, and he doesn't chastise his son either. So that's, I guess, on a personal level, that's a fantastic personal aspect of my life. My career in the police service was very important to me. Pardon?
Yeah, go on.
I see the administration of justice, which is probably only like 5% of your time. 95% of your time is looking after people and being a social worker and being a caring person and being a safety net. And I took that very seriously. And like I say, I think many times I was atypical, and I did start the Gay Police Association within the police as well, because I felt that we needed to work better, look after our gay staff, all of them. I use gay now. I'm using gay as a very broad term here. I know there's a group, a working party up here in Northern Ireland for the sexual orientation strategy, and I think we've agreed on LGBTQI+. But so I'm just going to use gay as I'm not excluding anyone. And also then for the police service to, if we couldn't look after and work well with our gay colleagues, how could they deal with gay families and gay individuals that we're dealing with? So that was really important. So I think my policing career, and I think I did make a difference, and I'm very proud of some of the work and there is a legacy from that. There was a young gay police officer was murdered, and that kind of, as a result, I came out in the police and then engaged with things. And 20 years later, I know that's still going quite strong. I think friendships are incredibly important. I don't have thousands of friends on Facebook. I don't have hundreds of friends. I have friends. I treat friendships deeply, deeply important. I value them. They are supportive to me. They are what makes life worth living. So the small circle of friends I hold close to me, I think it's really important to value them. I tell them I love them, freak some of them out, but I think it's important that we are a shoulder for people, that we watch out. We actually see people, and we intervene. And I've done that obviously as a police officer, but I still in my private life. If there's something wrong there, whatever way you can intervene, you should intervene. But in your friendships and your family, if you have them, I have no connection with my own family, but just to be there for those people and to remind them they're loved, and to be told that you're loved, and to be told that, to give them a gift and say, this is just a gift. I'm just buying you something as a treat because I was thinking about it the other day. And this happened very recently with me, where I bought something for a dear friend. And he's like, you didn't need to do that. I said, I know he didn't. It's just, that somebody was thinking about you, knew you actually liked this thing, and here it is. And they were like, oh, that's just lovely. So those are important, for me, those are important things. I mean, privately, obviously my druid journey has transformed the last, since I retired. I mean, retired now 16 years, and that's allowed me to go back to look at the green person that I was. And the past several years have been a wonderful journey. I go up at dawn at least twice a year to hold a ritual up at Scrabo. And something I know those fires lit up in Scrabo Hill, as it were, at my granny's at Slimish Mountain and stuff. She used to talk about the bone fires and stuff. And I light my fire, I have a cauldron, I light a fire there, and I know for hundreds of years, people over in Scotland and down to the Mourns and back to Ballimer could see those fires. And I'm now part of something ancient, and it has given me great peace and given me control in my life. And just like when you come out as gay, you come out as druid, it enables a compassion in your life. It enables an honesty and an integrity with people. And it also enables you to look at, like you talked about some of the issues about, there's been a lot of anger in the past year online, and I do step back. I've tried to reduce as much as possible the toxic things. There are things we need to watch the news. We need to be informed. We need to know when it was Trump or whether it's government injustices or political things. We need to be, and that's globally. We need to be informed about that, but in a way that isn't destructive to ourselves, that isn't disabling, or that we don't get into. I mean, I don't want to listen to somebody talking about how they can't tolerate this, I don't enable people to do that. Doesn't mean I don't think I should know about far-right groups or about racists or whatever it is, but wasting time, it's like, I don't mean to offend anybody, but like in Northern Ireland here, some of our hardcore fundamentalist Christians, I'm not going to waste my time arguing with them about whether being gay is right or being a druid is a justifiable, honourable path in life. You're wasting your breath. You can tell them about it and just leave it there, but I have no intention of getting them. So that's another aspect Druid has helped me to do that. It's helped me to refine my life, to be informed, to be compassionate, to step in if needs be, but to look after yourself as well. Look after those close around you, those that you care for. Sorry, I talk way too much sometimes.
Well, the echo will come back.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing is talking double. This is really strange. Okay. So, the most reckless thing you've done?
As a student, I got in some shady, stupid student politics. I was part of an anarchist collective, and I think I can say now, because it's like there's a statute of limitations of these things. I was involved in like robberies and some stuff like that, and there was going to be a nuclear power station built, we thought, in Carnshaw Point down south of Ireland. I remember going to the Screamer's house in Donegal, and we met these Iranians who were telling us how to blow up the foundations of this place if we really wanted to, and that, and those were informing things, and they were fantastic. That was so exciting in my life. But I can think of times when we went over to demonstrations in England at some of the American bases because of the new. By the skin of my teeth, I didn't get arrested, and I didn't maybe ruin the rest of my life. I think as in the police equally, it's one of those. And I know the health service has, I think, for the first time in generations, you've nurses and doctors going towards danger, and that's been a real challenge for them. It's same in the police. When I was in the police service, particularly during the Troubles, you went towards danger. That was expected of you. And I can think a number of times doing stuff thinking, I actually think I'm going to die here. If this is what I think it is, I'm going to die here probably. And I look back then and I think, God, I would have missed out on my son's life and so much else. And I don't, by luck or by, sometimes I think for people who say, oh, I was lucky I didn't do that, or that didn't happen. I think it's probably because you had intuition, you had experience, you calculate things, and 90% of the time you are taking a calculated risk. All right, maybe 10% you're totally reckless and you don't know all the risks that are there. But I know in the police I had to do things, and I never thought of myself as a brave man. As a child, I was quite squeamish around blood and stuff, and yet when you're in the middle of these things and you learn, you deal with things differently. So I think some shady stuff I did as a student. I don't I stole the mastermind came to university where I was, the university in Coleraine, and we kidnapped the mastermind chair to raise money for charity. What we didn't know was there was only one mastermind chair. They couldn't replace it. So we had and there's a live show then. This is when it was live. And Magnus Magnusson, in fact, in his autobiography, he said he would never come back to Northern Ireland again. But we kidnapped the mastermind chair to raise for charity, and we were in a student newspaper, and it got quite nasty. And then we were going to be thrown out of university and all sorts of things. But we managed to arrange a way to return the chair, very cleverly actually, by stashing it in the toilets in the Vice Chancellor's block. And they have no idea how we got it there from where we had it stashed. So that was reckless, and we very nearly got kicked out of university. But it was for the Japanese boat people actually at the time. We were raising money for that. It was a good cause. We just maybe went around the wrong way, and when we got in our tight corner, we actually threatened to burn the chair, which would have been disaster actually, and that would have been very bad. But we didn't. We returned it. We raised money, but that was a stupid thing as well.
Is Magnus alive? There's an echo thing.
I think he's passed now. He's passed.
Oh, I think that's a great story. Absolutely. Yeah.
No, he wrote about this book, and he said he would never come back to North Ireland again after that. And it was fun at the time. Student politics and students. You do these things, and it's a great laugh. And sometimes there are serious consequences. That one wasn't. It was just a TV show, but we were doing it for a good cause. But he took it very badly. He took it very personally. But to learn that there was only one chair, that we had total control of this live program, we felt like kings,
Well, you see, that was the power of the program. But it reminds me of, there was a film based on it where the students tried to, the Scottish university students tried to retrieve the Stone of Destiny.
Aye, yes.
Coronate under, where's the Queen crowned? What's that cathedral? It's gone.
Westminster Abbey?
Westminster Abbey, yeah. And that was a great story about trying to steal back the Stone of Destiny from... Did they actually steal it in the 50s? It went missing for a while, didn't it? Yeah. So, and that was, actually it was a university lecturer who, I think, incited, organised, talked about it, and then students got the idea, let's go down and reclaim it.
Do you know, I must admit, I regret that even in my day, and that's in the 70s, students were kind of radical, not that radical, but there was very little, it very quickly just goes to violence now. The radicalism and the sense of, having a good, a debate about it seems to have gone now. I mean, I think the students back in the 60s and stuff, and what they achieved, and there's real memories from it. There was an intellectualism and a common sense behind it, and I think we had some of that still in the 70s and 80s. But the world's very different now, and students, a lot of students don't want to do that. I have a friend who's a musical director in London, and he said, when he started 20 years ago, you had a lot of particularly gay students, and they'd be radical and they want to change the world, and now they come to his class 20 years later and they're like, oh, I want to get married and have kids and a dog, and and that's their outlook in life, and that's why I'm worried about the current legislation, even peaceful protest. We're never not going to need, and in a really great democracy, of course there should be room for protest. There should be room for dissension from what the party in power that has a majority, and but at the minute the way it's going, there's almost like no room for peaceful protest. If you're peaceful, then you're ignored, or you're corralled, or you're prevented. It's only when they step outside of those boundaries and get violent or become warriors, and that's a shame that space between that and the two extremes is vanishing for all of us.
Yes, and I suppose we've many of our many of our members are activists, and where does that come in? There's a lovely video clip of Dave the Bard at, I think it's in Balcombe, one of the early anti-fracking protests, and the police are getting a bit stroppy and a bit tetchy, and he just gets out his guitar and he just and it was peaceful, it was challenging, but it was a really, really creative way of doing it, because you couldn't have found fault with him. He was singing. It was just beautiful.
I think there are a number, even when you think of it, another bit different, like Tiananmen Square, remember that one individual who's back standing in front of the tank. We remember pictures of like a woman or even a couple lying down in front of a armed police or sort of embracing each other, or putting a flower into a gun, or praying in front of them, non-praying in front of the protesters, and there's definitely space for doing things differently. But I look at how the response in paramilitary police and even the police here in England, and there's I don't know whether it's a training or whether there's a fear or something, but it just goes like the women in Clapham who had the vigil. The whole bunch of reasons why it must have been clear to the police you really should just be very careful around this. And I think the report came out and said, "Oh, the women became did they use some term like they were verbally truculent with us," and that's the worst they did. I thought, wow, so the police
is very bad.
I mean, it was like they didn't like verbally abuse you. They weren't like, they were truculent in what they said. I thought, and that's how you justify. I mean, how far did they have to look in a Thor? So we need a word to describe something that sounds pretty desperate, but it's not really desperate at all. It's worrying that this is the way it's going. Very much so. Particularly for Druids who I know we historically we're known as peacekeepers, but it's keeping the peace between maybe the bigger state and people who disagree with it. It's about having some ground where there's room for discussion and room for people who love that tree that's going to be cut down, or that river or that town or village that's going to be destroyed, or that historic monument. Like Stonehenge, I can't really comment about what the plans are for the underpass and stuff like that, but I get it. It's a vast site, but how do you deal with that? And it's been on for so long, but it's very clear that if demonstrators try to do that, the response now of the state is the violence, is where the violence is coming from, and where the anger and the absolute intolerance for, if you don't agree with us, then we're not going to tolerate your presence. And when there's no room for that, it's a worrying situation.
It is. Okay, this is Alex Baer. Keeping the peace isn't about following the laws of man, it's about following the law of the heart and morality. That's an interesting one.
It is, because I guess the people who stormed Capitol Hill, Trump's people, thought they had the higher moral ground, and they were right. They seemed very convinced of it. So that's a difficult one. When it comes to morals, I'm no expert in morals and things of the heart, but you get equal passions on all sorts of sides. So I do think in all these things we need, just like Northern Ireland here, we have like a commission for the Orange Order parades. I suppose we have public hearings, and we have, but just like the very recent one in relation to issues around what happened in Clapham Colm and also racism and that, the independence of these things, which we rely on, I think I'm going to use the term British democracy, that they rely on these institutions to guard the rights of everybody, and particularly this last report about institutional racism in the United Kingdom or in England. a lot of people don't have confidence in it, and the fact that I can't remember the figure, but say there's 10 people on this panel, 9 of them are from an ethnic minority, and yet they still come out and say, no, there are no problems here, that there are no issues. It makes me wonder what's in it for them to say this, because the evidence, whether it's certainly anecdotal, but we all see it every day. That it's the mobile phone is a wonderful thing and a hateful thing at the same time. But people are recording it. If they weren't recording footage all the time, we wouldn't realize just how much is going on there that needs to be examined and needs to be questioned and needs to be the law, the police and the army and whatever it is, they need to be held accountable, and they wouldn't a lot of the time, particularly in America. How many shootings and things that police say they did within the law, which has to be a moral thing, within the law, turns out they didn't. They essentially murdered someone. They shot someone running away unarmed several times in the back, or trying to get into their car, or they beat them up, or they did it. So it's a difficult one for us all to find a place in. And before I just said, the framework of the law makes that clear for us. And it doesn't anymore. And that's the problem. And that's why that's such a difficult question, and at the minute, it seems to be, even in the UK, it's much more majority government. We will get reports put out the way we want them, and we'll say one thing, but really we mean something altogether different. And where do you go with that? That's, they're trying to do away with peaceful protest. The Secretary of State or the Home Secretary just has to say, I think this is going to be noisy and annoying, and therefore we can police it the way we want to police it to stop it happening. I mean, noisy and annoying, how could those terms be? If a refugee is seen to be at one of these, on the word of one police officer, they can have the refugee status revoked. Things like that. I wouldn't have believed it, but then I didn't believe Brexit was going to happen. So yeah.
I know. Okay, so I mean, we're really talking about challenging stuff that I don't have an answer for, just concerned about. What has been your biggest challenge that you've overcome?
I suppose, and it's a very personal one, I suppose, it's knowing that at one stage that I had to personally and professionally come out as gay. That I had to tell my wife of 14, 15 years that I wasn't the person who'd been having affairs or anything about it, but just that because of a colleague who was killed, and he was shot dead in a gay bar, and I saw how he was treated before and after within the organisation, I just decided this can't happen again. And doing that, and that the consequences that had eventually for our relationship, and the time I would spend with my son and stuff, that was really difficult. That was shocking. I would say, as a very young person, a difficult thing. For many, many years, I wanted to kill my father, and I never did. So I always used to dream as an 8-year-old of hitting him in the head with this really large crystal ashtray. None of us smoked, I recall, but I always wanted to kill my father because he was a brute of a man. But he was so powerful, and I always thought, no matter how hard I hit him, he would get up again and then kill me. So I never did that. But no. And coming out is a very big journey for people. It's even now, it's still seen. You're still seen as being utterly different. As being the very fact that still most gay people won't walk down the street holding hands if they want to. Not that everybody does that anyway. That they check themselves, like Panty and the famous speech in Dublin. Right. That we still need gay bars. That we still. There are still hate crimes, and that the police and different organizations don't deal with it effectively. That whole journey of telling someone that you are that different in how you feel and how you love and the way you have to live your life. It's not just the way you want to. It's if you want to live a life that is full and happy and natural and equal to everybody else, that's it. It's a very different circumstance. It's a very different reality. So telling my wife, somebody who I made promises to, was a very difficult decision. And I don't regret it. She's now very happily married and has been, and has a great life. But that was, and my life never changed. It never was the same thereafter, because I had to tell people at work, and I lost a lot of friends, and I had to tell my son, and then being a polyamorous man, that was a whole other conversation. But it opens you up to being able to interact with people and be honest with people and be honest with yourself and in relationships and with the world in a way that maybe wouldn't happen for me and a lot of gay people if they didn't go through that personal journey of being said, no, it's not that I'm black, so I don't have to come out as being black, but I can empathize what it's like to be different, what it's maybe like to be somebody in a wheelchair or somebody who has no choice because they are different. That's the way they are. And now, of course, being trans is one of the big debatable issues, stuff. And I had to for quite a while think myself, well, if I knew I was different, if I kind of knew my schoolmates were talking about girls that I didn't, I'm pretty sure I thought about that, about the boys. Then same with trans. If I back then when I was 9 or 10 knew there was something wasn't right, I'm in the wrong body. I'm not the person I'm supposed to be. And I had to really, even I as a gay man, had to really sit and think about this. And I get it why other people who haven't transitioned haven't had to make decisions, and maybe the way I've had to, obviously millions of other people. It's easier for me to think about other people, the things they have to do in their life, the challenges they have, and the way they want to live their lives openly and honestly and truthfully and healthily. And I think being gay has really helped me to do that.
There's one here from Alex. Coming out is never just a one-time thing. And this is really interesting. I've been out as a trans for half a decade, and there's still always someone who doesn't know.
Yeah. It's true. I was invited to go back to a school reunion, which I hadn't seen any of them since I was 18. And and then I didn't go because I thought, I'm going to spend the whole night. And they knew I got married and stuff, and they knew I was divorced now, but I'm going to have to spend the whole night coming out again and again and again and again, because we don't run about with rainbow flags. We don't, all right, we do it pride and stuff, but, so it is, there is that thing of where you, like, even tonight, just comes, I thought, it's quite natural and instinctual to do it, but you have to, you feel being dishonest with someone. They maybe see a ring on your finger and they make assumptions. I don't want to mislead people. I want them to know that. So when they say, "Oh, how's your, how is she?" and you say, "Actually, it's he." I don't want them to have to make that mistake. I want to let them know, and it's okay. That's a conversation we have. But you're right. In any new connection, any new circumstance, and I don't work anymore. But in the any job you go to, you shouldn't have to. But I think if it, like Harvey Milk said, the more closet doors that are blown off their hinges, the better it is for everyone. If it's a good place for me as a gay man or anybody who's an LGBTQI+, if it's a good place inside for them to live in, it's a great place then for women or disabled or black, because if people accept that, I'm not saying there's a hierarchy, I'm just saying it's indicative of the society we live in. So yeah, I encourage people as much as possible to be honest and to be out as much as them, because it's going to be better for them, and it's going to be better for everyone else around them probably.
It was Ricky. Every time you change, here's my echo. Sorry, Ricky, you're bringing the echo out of me. So every time you change employer, move house, get new neighbours, etc., you come out again. It's a lifelong process, not a singular occasion. Absolutely.
Maybe you should have a rainbow tattoo on her forehead or something. It'd be so easy. Or there must be in the future there will be something where you can have a subliminal sign above your house, so gay family here or whatever. I don't know. Maybe that's in the future. But no, that's right. And it's something that the people who aren't gay or lesbian or bi, whatever, or trans don't have to do. I mean, it's not as difficult. I mean, if I'm a black person, yeah, I still got that thing when I move into a neighborhood. How they can see me. I can't hide it in any way. So how am I viewed? But people see it, and so with the gay, it's like, when do you tell people? Are you hiding something? Are you ashamed? Are you? And then there is a thing about if there are children about some people mistrust, particularly gay men, when it comes to if they're children or how they interact, or that's why there are fewer primary school teachers who are men, and a whole range of connection things around that. So we've a way to go, but I get what you're saying. Work, a new house. a new area, and you meet a new friend in a social circle, and you think, do they know? Should we tell them what? You talk to somebody on Facebook, somebody connects you because they like your poetry, or they want to know about poetry, or they want some, and you think, when do I tell? Should I tell them? Because will that change how they feel, or will they suddenly? Because it's so easy on social media just like to block you, to like suddenly they don't exist, you're ghosted, and that's it. So yeah.
And then Dean White says, I agree with you. I found Deirdre's helped me accept myself for who I am and my sexuality and feeling part of a community.
Yeah, I don't know what the percentage of the last Druid camp I was at. I did like it that we had there was a queer tea party thing.
That's right. I remember that was my only Druid camp to go to.
Yeah,
and you had wonderful. There were teapots and china cups and cakes and. I remember going.
Nice. It was one of those things. I mean, we all look for some kind of recognition that we're valued and that we're welcome, and that was just a nice way. And it wasn't just; it was just for anybody who wanted to. But it was hosted by gay people for gay people, and like I say, when I use gay, I mean I'm the total spectrum. And I think, yeah, that's a good thing. The more and more we see that type of thing, the better.
And of course, we have OBOD in OBOD,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a really important one. And this is interesting. Alex says, sometimes that visibility is an act of service to our gods by making things safer for the next generation. I think that's really, really important that, I suppose the only outing I had to do in my life was be a Druid, having come from a Roman Catholic background. And I've always done it. I've never hidden it. Where a lot of people would say, well, we can't say that. I was at this Druid weekend, or I was at the shamanic weekend, but I had to tell my family I was doing yoga. And I go, why? I've never done that. It's like, and I taught in a seminary for 27 years. And everybody knew I was a Druid and a priestess. And it's that. And what I found is, once you're out, and this is my experience, so I've been very, very fortunate where I've come out with that I haven't met much antagonism. I know my mother found it very difficult, but now she listened to the installation ceremony. She has found me sometimes, what has happened, which was really funny. Some of the teas I did during the summer came into her feed, but she was watching something on meditation. Somehow I came in and she actually liked it. And that's been a huge shift in her accepting me as a Druid. And I don't think she's worried I'm going to go to hell anymore, that she actually just has realized that I am very, very spiritual.
Yeah.
And that there is, my love of nature. She has a love of nature. Okay, hers is down the Roman Catholic Church. Mine is a different way. But that we can actually, she's actually beginning to recognize that there is far more that unites us than separates us. So she's not so caught up in, am I going to go to hell because I have left the Catholic Church?
There was someone in the Belfast pagan group. I think Pat might have been at their wedding. And I think they went down to Tower or something. And their family, a lot of them actually did come in the end. And as far as I understand, some of them said it was kind of the most beautiful wedding they've been at, because they listened to the words and they saw the ceremony and thought, in a way, how is this any different from any wedding I've been at before, except it's more open and honest and freer, and we're not relying on I'm going to use priest, like a priest, minister, pastor, whatever, to dictate the rules and regulations of how we do this. And equally, Emma, the funeral at yours, I mean...
Howard's funeral, yeah, absolutely.
You overheard conversations of people on that beautiful sunny day saying, this is beautiful. But they actually, it was almost like enjoying a funeral, and I know that's okay to say to you, because it was beautiful, and because nature was absolutely a riot that day. The twitter-pated butterflies and the bird song and the sun. But a lot of people came and thought, okay, we don't need it. This doesn't need to have a priest, and this is it's a celebration of a life that is now transitioned, and the person's very much the centre of it. A lot of those people, you hear them saying that, why this is no different to, in fact, sometimes you go to, particularly a Presbyterian, sometimes, whatever, it's a very droll, kind of mournful, no matter how much of a happy thing it's not. So I think people who do go to and go to rituals as well, really think, oh, something maybe the craziest I thought, or the mystical stuff that I'm never going to understand what's really going on here. It's not there. They can relate to it in a way which is very, very natural and very kind of healthy and makes you feel a connection with the people around you as well as anything else that you're looking for.
That's so true, because people still talk to me about that. And I know because the funeral was in the house or in the garden, in Ireland, I suppose it's predominantly Christian country. So most people know how funerals are carried out, except we waked out here, actually in this room here now, for 5 days. And then people came, and then we had the ceremony in our grove, and then he's buried in the graveyard next door. So we had about 200 people, which is small for an Irish funeral, but very big for a funeral in someone's garden. These are rare. But people came up and said, "Oh, you're very spiritual." I said, "Yeah, we are." "Oh, no, but it was really, really spiritual. My God, you pagans are really, your Druids are actually spiritual." "Yeah." "No, but I mean, it really is." I said, yeah. So just that, just not getting...
And there wasn't a chicken slaughtered or a goat killed
No.
or anything at all.
when I was being brought up in the Roman Church, a pagan had two meanings. One was you worship false gods, or you didn't believe in anything. And you get the odd bishop or priest every few years ago, and it's even in this past year, Ireland is full of pagans, meaning they're not going to mass. Yeah. It isn't that there are actually more pagans. But I have a close friend who's a priest, and he rang me. He was at Howard's funeral, and he rang me 2 days afterwards, and he said, "Eimear, I was blown away by that funeral." He said, "I was saying mass to my congregation yesterday, and I was telling them about it, and I said, this is how it should be done." And he had to ring me to tell me, and we both, because I'm a celebrant, and we both talk about the marriages that we've performed, and he says, "How many of yours are still together?" It's that kind of, but it's interesting, you talk about that ceremony you and Pat went to, that wedding, that most of the guests at the pagan weddings I do are Roman Catholic. Yeah. And there will be some who will not know, be a little bit uncomfortable at the beginning because they don't know what to expect. They don't know all of that stuff, like sacrificing chickens or dancing naked around a circle or whatever it is. But I've had so many elderly people come up. And I remember my very, very first one, which was, in 2004, or was it 2006? I can't remember. It was outside in November. And the brides had, I think, elderly aunts and uncles, and they came up and they said, "That was the nicest wedding I have been ever at." And I remember doing one for a couple in Sligo, and the nephew said, "Well, I'm going to use some swear words here, so if you're sensitive to the F word, please close your ears." That was the best fucking mass I was ever at. And it was, and I've had people say, "I don't listen when I go to weddings, but I listened to what you had to say." And it was that, because it's very, very hard to argue with a nature-based ritual. And I've done weddings where people who were fundamentalist Christians, born agains, who actually came up and said, "That changed me, that ceremony." Yeah. So that's what I love about Druidry, is that in many ways it can act as a bridge. And I suppose particularly in the order, in OBOD, that we have that openness, that it can act as a bridge for many people, but spiritual paths or if you're dealing with sexuality or gender, whatever, that there is a bridge there and a community that, and I love that openness.
I think it's because as well, Druidry, for the most part, I was saying around, were 21st century Druids, were Druids for today.
That's
and
right.
Therefore, I remember the funeral. I remember there was the women in the kitchen, and I remember standing outside. Remember had when Philip and up there had the kind of wake ritual.
Yes.
Up in the top room. And I was standing outside, and I was listening. I could hear the ladies down in the kitchen. They were talking about some farmer across the hill who was single, and they were all trying to marry him off. And I was thinking, as a kid, I remember wakes, I guess, where the women were making the tea and the sandwiches, and there was all this banter. It wasn't like a sorrowful thing. It was there was a crack, and there was all this. And this has happened down here, and yet there's this really beautiful, loving, just holding of a space and holding of people and holding of you. And I thought, this is how this can marry. This is how this can be done. This is how it is. And then, of course, as the funeral went on the next day and stuff, I think people, they all see stuff on TV, and you see like people see things like Robin Hood and stuff in films, and they see that them getting married outdoors, and think, oh God, isn't that beautiful? And then they actually see it in real life. They see it happening in the 21st century, where two people can choose to be out in nature and not to have the regulations and the format of what everybody's used to. Everybody's used to go in and sitting in a pew and getting up and getting down and doing responses and stuff. And yes, there is a certain amount of joy, and it depends a lot on the minister and stuff. But in those ceremonies, there's just a difference. We talk this past year, I suppose, with COVID, there's been too few new memories made. There's that. We mark time by new memories and think, oh, do you remember when we did that? And we haven't had that. But anybody who's gone to a funeral or a wedding or a blessing or a hand fasting, they'll remember that one and not the other 10 weddings they were at, because it's so involving, so beautiful, so different, and the couple themselves are so central to it. They're not being forced to do something and they have to comply with everything that's going on around. It's their ceremony, it's their ritual, it's their bringing together of people, and I think that's and kind of the love and the community and the family is what's central. It's not it's not what the head druid says at the front. That's not what's directing it, and it's what they're doing as a service to those people and for those people. So yeah, absolutely.
And holding ritual, holding weddings in a circle, and also Howard's funeral was in a circle, so that everybody is part of, rather than the chief.
You're not looking at the back of the head. You're looking at people. You're looking across. You're seeing the coffin in the middle and the people are there, but you can see everybody around you and how they're feeling, and holding hands as well. But a very natural, instinctual circle that you follow around it. It's a very different thing. Absolutely.
Okay, so we've done a lot of talking. And you may, I don't know if you've actually. You may have already answered or addressed this at some point, because we've talked about lots of things. One concern that you have about the modern world?
Oh, as a father and a grandfather, I just wonder what the world's going to be like in 50 years' time. With climate change is a fact. Whether it's part of a natural cycle which we're exacerbating, where we're adding to, I don't know, but the world is going to be a very different place in another couple of generations. There are places in the world where it's going to be too hot for people to live because of the desert. There's going to be a real poverty brought about by that. Also, all the predictions are there's going to be vast population changes naturally. Some of the European countries are going to the population is going to change. Maybe not so much in the UK, but the numbers are going to dramatically change. And I worry for my son and my grandson. I worry what it's going to be like. And I accept that it's a natural thing. I personally believe that eventually the human race will die out. The dinosaurs died out. Different, there are cycles, and that's why I believe that probably we'll never have anybody visiting us from another planet, because they're probably just like us. They live out a certain lifespan. They get to a certain point, and then they self-destruct. And I wish we weren't looking at Mars or the Moon or Venus. I wish we were looking at the planet. This planet can sustain us. A population way bigger, even though we have to, but we're just not. There are tipping points. I know there's been films made about it, but I did environmental science 30 years ago when it wasn't popular, and my professors then saying things about food, about insecticides and pesticides, how they would combine. I look at the countryside now, and I remember what it was like as a kid for the diversity of animals, and I'm just talking rabbits and pheasants and kestrels and songbirds. And I remember I went shooting with my dad, and there was always huge flocks of pigeons. You don't see huge flocks of even wood pigeons anymore. Ducks and stuff. It's I accept the things like the panda bear is an evolutionary cul-de-sac. That creature shouldn't probably exist anymore. But on the bigger picture, I really worry. You look at these, science fiction often becomes science fact, and science fiction has us living in pods in the future, isolated, being fed some processed stuff just to keep us going, and everything's on a screen. And I'm joyed with the fact that maybe our cars are all going to go electric within 20 years, and but that's only it's a snippet. Other countries that are now like China and India and different, it's their turn to be big economies, and yet we want to deny that to them because we've had our period of time, and we now want to save the world. And I think it's inevitable that there's going to be huge challenges for humankind. Never mind nature around it. I just think I don't regret having children, but I do think sometimes, oh my God, what is it going to be like when my grandson is my age and maybe he has children, and they'll be saying, what have we done, and why did we ever do this? And it's only going to be, even if there is space travel, it's only going to be the Elon Musks and stuff of that time who are going to go there. So yeah, I really worry about that.
It's an interesting thing. I felt, not that I've always, no, I have never felt really, really invincible. But if I was on a scale of things, I felt far more invincible when I didn't have children. As soon as I had children, I began to worry. The world became a scary place where if it was just me, I'd say, okay, well, I'm the age I am, 84. I'll be gone in another 30 years because I'm going to live long. But I can die, and I'm okay with that. But it's like, oh no, this I have children, and I may have grandchildren, and I may have great grandchildren.
Yeah. And
that makes it a dangerous, I worry. I can't be blasé and say, well, it's okay because it's just me. But
and all the dystopian films that we see about what happened, say there is a massive sunburst and the microchips around the world no longer work and society collapses. I suppose I take it with the troubles here, and the troubles were bad enough. But when I work with Somali or Afghani or Syrian asylum seekers and refugees who lived this lovely, some of them middle-class life, and how life within 2-3 years, now 10 years in Syria, was reduced to a subsistence level. There's a guy in Hungary I contacted, I helped him with his English. He was doing his degree, and he had and the same thing happened in Bosnia and stuff like that. And he had electricity for 2 hours a day. They had to walk half a mile to get buckets of water, and this is like in a major city in Syria, which was a center of culture, and it's just so things can change very, very quickly.
That's right,
and that worries me that this whole that we could wake up tomorrow and something's happened and our cars don't start anymore and power stations don't run and computers don't run and mobile phones don't run and everything because chips, that they've all been fried and a very natural thing, which is quite possible. Although there's some sort of cyber attack, which is really huge. And I know how quickly society could break down and how vulnerable as an individual, you think, I can be a survivor. But you're right. You've got friends you care for. You've got elderly parents. You've got children. You've got your neighbor who you've known for years. And are you thinking, oh, no, I hope they die and I get all the food that's in their house or something? Or do you? It could happen so quickly, and humankind hasn't, as we've matured and we've become more civilized, we haven't become a better place to live or a more rational part of the ecosystem. We are more dangerous and more destructive and vulnerable than we've ever been before, I think.
Yeah, and just Jacqueline says pandemic has proved that. It's rocked our sense of order. Absolutely. Okay.
Contagion. I know everybody's talked about this film back from 2004 or whatever. And I thought, I must watch it. And I watched it the other night. And I swear to God, I could not believe how predictive it was. Right up to the very last scene where the bat drops a bit of food down and the pig eats it. And this, I thought, everything in that film has just happened. So it didn't. I don't need Bill Gates to. We all know he predicted this and predicted that. Here's a film which, the death rate was much higher. Almost in every aspect of that film, we've lived through it the past year. Not as bad and not as destructive, but nonetheless, hundreds of thousands of people have died. I'm thinking, wow, oh my God.
You see, and I think it's hubris. I just see Ali has put here, yet we're all far more vulnerable than we realize. And I think it's to recognize how vulnerable we are. And I think when we can, that gives us enough humility And I'm talking about genuine humility. It's not about saying, I never describe myself as humble, because I always think I'm far too arrogant to call myself that. But there's that sense of recognizing our vulnerability. Control is illusion. Absolutely, Jacqueline. I couldn't agree with you more. But given that I'm feeling quite hopeless now, do you have any hope about the modern world? I see Gabby says, I'm fairly optimistic about the future, not in the sense that things will be wonderful, but in the sense that we're living the best stage of human society, that we are healing. It's a process. Gabby, I hope this is so true.
I think some
modern world.
Yeah, see, I think some of us are. I mean, in many countries, we've never had it so good. It's unbelievable. I think people forget that. If we even just go back 2 generations, how my grandparents lived in that. So, something I was thinking of saying there. What the heck was it? No, I've lost it. What would you say? The question again? See if it.
What gives you hope? What hopes do you have about the modern world?
That's what I was going to say. The whole thing about fracking, which you mentioned earlier on, and now fracking is largely not going to happen as far as I understand it. I know there's a whole. It's very complicated, but I don't know why. But I really feel the energy of people that went into opposing fracking. And I don't mean just standing in barriers. I mean the spiritual warriors. I genuinely, for some reason, feel that made a difference, that had an impact. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other economic and political reasons behind it as well. So I still believe that people can, maybe if everybody was a druid, life would be very different. We'd be living in this wonderful utopia. But I do believe that human will and humans, and like that thing I talked about, rituals, and this is nothing original, I'm repeating other people's work, that dropping of a pebble into a pond and the ripples that we send out, I do believe, and there are communities who think like us, whether they're in Peru or Australia or Siberia or north of Finland, and they're not druids, but they have that connection with nature. I believe if we can foster that energy, I do think we can change things for the better. Now, climate change is one thing. I don't know if we can change that, but I think there's an untapped power there, a connectiveness which could be utilized to help make the world a better place. And if not a better place, at least the people who live in it deal and cope with their lives and their humanity and their sense of community in a way which could only improve it and help us all deal with the challenges. And that there are going to be challenges. There always have been challenges. I mean, if we lived in 1916, they'd be laughing at us now. It's like a year with like a flu and stuff. We've had wars and a revolution. We've had the Spanish flu and everything. Go to South America, civilizations have vanished because of different aspects. But so this is nothing new. So that gives me hope. Even though the population is as vast as it is, that there's still we talk about humanity. We talk about that. That's why is spirituality. If you go to find a tribe in some part of a jungle, they still have a spiritual connection to there's a tree or a river or a cave or a planet or something. There is something within us that connects us to Mother Earth. I'm still struggling and trying to connect with this spirituality of Gaia, the soul, where our souls go when we die, the soulfulness of the earth. I still think there's something that I'm not going to say it's going to heal everything, but I think more and more that's what people are going to look to and look for and embrace, and maybe that energy will sustain us as a human race way longer than we might otherwise expect to or have a right to survive and prosper and do all this. But that's I hold on to that as well, so I do.
It's interesting to go back to, you were talking about the fracking and how it's kind of seems to not going to be happening. And remember the Warrior's Call and the number of rituals that, we were part in, and how that had an impact. And then I don't know if you're Aaron or Aaron, one thing that gives me hope is the number of people I see meditating and taking an interest in spirituality, which when I was a kid was unheard of. My family and I were all in the spiritual closet. I remember this was maybe 30 years ago when the war in Lebanon 30 years ago, a group of people went there. I don't know where they were from, maybe Europe, someplace, maybe the US, spent a week in Beirut meditating. And during that week, the level of violence dropped. And then when they left, it went back up again. And that notion of meditating, ritual, you have enclosed orders, religious orders like the Poor Clare nuns we have here, and I'm sure there are other orders, where you have, nuns and monks who are in perpetual prayer.
Yeah.
And they're praying for the earth, which is and it's not about, they're awful people, avoiding life and locking themselves away. Isn't that a horrible place? But they're probably in a state of bliss, meditating, praying, however they do it. But that is something that's really, really important. And Eric Morgan says, I'm still hopeful that people are evolving slowly. I think so, and I think people are waking up. Dean White says, I agree. My dream is to show people the benefits of it, not to try and change them or their beliefs, but to show them the benefits. So it's hopefully there's something about seeing people praying that just fills onlookers' hearts with a sense of peace. I think so. That and if we can all do a bit of that, as well as, it's not point just praying and doing nothing else, because we live in the modern world, but to do whatever we can.
Oh yeah, whenever I see someone posting something on Facebook, I think, oh, that's great, you've raised an issue, but I want to ask them, are you going to do anything? Are you going to go out and spend a couple of hours volunteering to help make that change that you wish for, or that you're pushing on Facebook or social media? It does require us absolutely to physically engage and contribute and be a voice, as well as, and I think this, I'm loving this point to come up, that there is something about the energy that we have within us and the connectedness of that potentially, and the more we do that, that example you gave of the Lebanon, it's if that was the fact, it's kind of undeniable. There was a consequence, there was a reaction. How did that? I'm not a great fan of Mahatma Gandhi. There was the whole other big picture, but that whole idea of absolutely peaceful protest, of putting yourself and just showing and then sitting down and as a massive 10, 100, 10,000 people focusing on a right or a justice or a health or I genuinely believe there is power in that. Unfortunately, too many people see cults and these things get abused, or we only ever see that side of it. We only ever see somebody dressed in like a particular garb standing at Stonehenge, being a king or something, and that's what people see. But there is so much. I think there's never been a greater need, I think I've said this before, for people like Druids as individuals and within the community. And when they're out there doing this stuff, not being shy to say, this is part of my service as a Druid. This is in 21st century. This is what a Druid does as they're called to be a service to the community, and whatever small capacity or time that is, but actually being seen to do it and saying you're doing it. Because I think actions and example definitely is has an impact on other people around you, whether it's like it's at the funeral or the wedding, or it's seeing an individual doing something, the right thing for the right reasons, because that's who they are. And
here's the echo again. As a disabled person, praying and meditating is all I can do. It's better than doing nothing. And I think it's more than better than doing nothing, Sean. I think it's really, really important. And I think our own inner world as Druids, our inner grove work is central to our Druidic practice. So it's way more than doing nothing. It's actually doing something really profound for ourselves individually, but also being able to, for that to ripple out, like you said, you mentioned the pebble in the throwing a pebble into the water and then ripple out. I think it's very, very important. So there are things we can do, and I think it's instead of attacking people and those people that we don't approve of or whose views we don't like, there seem to be at the opposite polar end of whatever the issue is actually living in a proactive way rather than in a reactive. So I react negatively and angrily to that out there. It's like, well, what can I do in a proactive way? Because I can put more energy into this. That I'm not suggesting we don't object, or I'm not saying we can't be angry, but there's about being proactive in terms of our activism or our druidic practice rather than reactive. I think there's, I think important one. One last question before we go is, what will you not compromise on? What is not negotiable for you?
Ooh, boy.
I thought I'd end on an easy question.
What is not negotiable?
Yeah.
God. Give me a bit more of that question. Just say something more around it.
Well, it's this could be just in your own personal life. What will you not negotiate on? So, what value do you have that you will not negotiate on? Or not compromise on? I think it's a hard one, but
it's a very hard one because there are things. It's not that the first thing that sprang to my mind is my relationship with my son and grandson, and my love for them, and my willing to sacrifice everything for them is non-negotiable.
Okay.
This is a weird thing. I don't know why, but I remember thinking about what would happen if somebody said to you, "You can vanish now. Nobody will know where you've gone. Nobody will know why you've gone or how you've gone. But if you do that, everybody else around you will live happy." And that, would you do it? And my instinct initially is, yes, of course. That's it, because that guarantees the happiness and the well-being of the people I love. So there's that side of things. I suppose I bring a lot of. I think about my time in the police, and there's just it's not the rule of law, but I think back to what we understand to be the history of the Druids and the police as lawgivers and peacekeepers and that, and I part of why I volunteer with refugees, and same as I did with the LGBT community, because there were vulnerable people who didn't have a voice for them, an advocate for them, somebody to stand up. And I think that's the organisation I left. I know now has 19 staff, and it's well resourced, and they work well in the asylum and refugee sector. It's I know it's a very popular one, but it's actually really under resourced, and the need is so much greater. So I'm drawn to that because those people don't have a voice. They don't have the language sometimes when they come here. It's not their first language. They don't understand. They have a fear. For them, the police and a lot of government agencies are dangerous. They see those as things that can stop them living or to prevent them having a life, whatever. So it's their human rights. I can't compromise on that. And I can't do much about that. I can only do my small bit. I can only contribute to it and learn from people and signpost and be as capable as I can to do that. But that kind of human rights, the right of, no matter who you are in society, to be heard and to be equal to me and to have the right to get... I do count myself as a very lucky, a very privileged individual. I had a tough life and all, but I had a good education. I worked all my life. I have no financial concerns. I have people who love me, family and friends, and I want that for anybody else. When I see refugees coming, I know they had that, and now they don't. Yeah. And when I hear politicians or I hear people saying things, that's why I'm not going to argue with those people, but that's why I'm going to do what I do, because I have to do what I can in my small way to try and enable those that don't have that to at least, the aspirations they have to try and see if they can realize that. So,
Gavin says, here comes the voice again. Based on the conversation, I would say that the right to exist in his own authentic self sounded non-negotiable. And I would think so.
Okay.
I have one more question. What is your favorite ceremony or your favorite festival in terms of the Wheel of the Year?
I'm not sure why, but I guess it's because my grandmother always used to talk at Halloween, as she would talk at Samhain, at the bonfires in Slimish Mountain. And because we had that whole connection with like St. Patrick and up there and stuff and that, and I used to go up to Slimish Mountain a lot, and I remember finding a raven's nest up there in a kind of a small cave and stuff. So this idea of, and because I've just come to terms to accept that I am the last in my generation now. Everybody in my family is now younger than me. So I'm like a living ancestor. So, yeah. I've just forgotten the question again.
Your favorite festival of the week?
Yeah. So Samhain is, it just, for some reason, it connects me with my grandmother. It connects me with that time of year, going into the darkness, this whole thing about the veil being thinnest, and the ability to connect, and just taking that time to, life, the sap in life all around has gone down. I mean, like I cut a branch in a tree 2 days ago, and literally 10 minutes later, water was running out of the branch. The sap was really rising. It was amazing. And I don't think I've ever really seen that before or been cognizant of it. But there's something about going into the darkness, about going into winter and going into that time when it's, everything else is settling down. It's very much about people and family, past and present and future. That's my, I don't know, I love the dark. I'm a night owl. So I love being out in the dark and listening to wildlife and the sounds and being by the beach to see at night or looking at the stars. I go out and lie out. I always have done. So I think that's my favorite. I only celebrate the two. I do this Samhain and Beltane. Those are my two ones for the dark and the light. Those are two that mean the most to me. And if I had to choose one, and I think it's because Scrabble, also it's cold when I'm up there, and sometimes I'm barefoot and it's bitter. It reminds me of what it was like for Druids. It wasn't easy then. You didn't have a centrally heated home to go back to. You hadn't just hopped out of your car. You had probably walked and stayed up all night, and you'd been meditating for hours, and it was cold and wet and windy. And to decide to do that took effort. It took a real, I am here to connect. I am here. This is not easy. I'm, don't get me wrong, sometimes it's beautiful. Sometimes I have done, when it's been wet and windy and it's been like, woohoo. But it means, for some it makes it more real to me. And that's what I value as part of my path. That absolute starkness, that real connection with nature. Nature is a force to be reckoned with. And it's more likely to be a force to be reckoned with in November than it is in
that wonderful raw connection. Vincent, it's been an absolute joy talking to you this evening. Thank you so much. So I'm just going to close you off and just say goodbye to our audience. I just want to thank you all for your contribution to the conversation, your questions. I know some had questions. I didn't get to deal with all of those, so apologies for that, but Vincent and I will read your comments. I really, really appreciate it. It's lovely to see the familiar names, and thank you all. I'm just saying, it's just, you saying you never realized how interesting and how much you can take from the conversation, and so uplifting and enlightening. And I just find that from all of my guests, it's just a wonderful way to spend an evening. So, and knowing that we have an audience and viewers who are able to contribute to the conversation and to feed the questions, it is absolutely wonderful. So I look forward to seeing you all next week. And today is April Fool's, and we didn't have any April Fool's jokes. So look forward to seeing you all next Thursday. In the meantime, and this is Easter for any of you who celebrate Easter. May the hare, the bunny, and lots of chocolate eggs come to you if that is your way. So we're still in lockdown, so it'll be in the garden for me. So the weather, I hope, will be warm enough to be out in the garden. So till next week, slán go fóill. Bye-bye.